morning everyone, and welcome to Learn with Lorna 129. So welcome to Learn with Lorna. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. The Highland Archive Service looks after historic documents from the Highlands of Scotland, covering at the moment the last 700 years or so in our 4 centres in Inverness, Wick, Fort William and Portree. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland. There's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. If you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful. Thank you. And I know that people have done this week because I've had some messages saying so, so thank you very much. This is the last Learn with Lorna before Christmas. And so always an opportunity to take a moment and say thank you for your company this year, but also thank you for all your lovely cards and emails, presents and messages and all sorts of things. It's very, very much appreciated. So thank you. It's just so nice to know that we're having a connection across the void of the internet. So thank you so much, and thank you, as I say, for all your lovely messages throughout the year. Really, really appreciated. This is live, obviously, but the next 2 will be pre-recorded. So please remember to come on to whichever Facebook page you watch us on of the 4 centres and find the film there, because it will go out slightly differently because it's pre-recorded. This month we are focusing on the subject of arts and entertainment. Last week we looked at art and artists, and I hope you liked looking at the pictures that I uploaded afterwards. A lot of responses to those, so that's great. And next week I'll be looking at music, dance and drama in the collections. But this week we're looking at the story of one particular actress, Mabel Love. Using the collection of her papers that we hold, and also using newspaper articles from the British Newspaper Archive, I am entirely prepared to overrun today, so sorry. Sorry for everyone, but particularly sorry for those on the other side of the world who will have to stay up later. I think this will probably go on a little bit. Mabel Love's papers aren't a standalone collection. They're part of a collection within a larger collection. So they are part of D522 Duncan and Duncan Solicitors. Now, Duncan and Duncan Solicitors is a large collection. They were solicitors based in Dingwall, and like all solicitors past and present, they had a huge number and huge variety of clients. And so when solicitors' collections come to us, they often have a huge variety of kind of little collections within them and a huge amount of information, because they're split by the different individuals or different organisations or businesses who have used their services. And Duncan and Duncan is just like this. There are papers of hotels within it. There are papers of the Highland Squirrel Club, which I have to tell you is not the same as the Tufty Club. It's much grimmer. And many other collections, including the papers of Mabel Love. Now, Mabel Love was one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation. If you have a minute, either while I'm talking or afterwards, then do go and type her into a search engine and you'll see a picture of her. She looks exactly like our image of a Victorian Edwardian actress. She was a famous performer, an actress, a dancer, and also a very famous beauty. She was known as the pretty girl of the postcard. And she was based in London and was absolutely at the centre of that kind of theatrical, dramatic, artistic, photographed world. So how did the collection find its way to a Dingwall solicitor? It's something for a long time we've been unsure about. Why did this collection come to us? Because she lived her whole life in the south of England. Yes, Jen, she is absolutely gorgeous. She's got a really beautiful face. So I've done a bit of digging with my colleague Anne Fraser, who some of you will know, our family historian, and we've made some interesting connections. I penciled down some thoughts that I had about Mabel and her family, took them to Anne, who within 10 minutes produced this family tree for me. Classic Anne, anyone will say who knows her. So we discovered that Mabel Love was born Mabel Frances Watson on the 16th of October 1873 in Folkestone in Kent. Her parents were Kate Love and Lewis Grant Watson, so you're seeing some Scottish names coming in. Kate Love, Mabel's mother, was an actress as well. She was born in Dublin in Ireland, and her father, Mabel's grandfather, William Edward Love, was a noted lecturer and ventriloquist and performer. And when he died in 1867, the newspaper described him as a most successful amuser of the public, which I'm thinking I might get put on my grave, a most successful amuser of the public, before ill health had led to a decline in his career. So it's clear that the acting and performing gene came from her mother's side, with her mother being an actress and her grandfather being a performer as well. Mabel's father, Lewis Grant Watson, was not in the theatrical world. He was recorded in the census as a wine merchant, and what Lewis gives us is a connection to Scotland. Not quite Highland, but just over the border in Moray. He was born in Forres in 1839 and lived there in the High Street throughout his childhood. And it's by going back in his tree, Mabel's father's tree, that we find the connection to the Highlands. Lewis's mother, Mabel's grandmother, was from Cromdale, and her father was the Reverend Gregor Grant, minister of Kilmuir Easter near Tain. And this family, as is often the way, goes back in a line of ministers in Cromdale, in Kirkmichael, on the Black Isle, and elsewhere. It also links in to the Cuthbert of Castle Hill family, which is a prominent family in Inverness. So there is a long Highland connection, albeit a couple of generations back. And this might be the reason that Mabel's papers are held by Duncan and Duncan. Also, just as an aside, incidental that although the acting clearly came from her mother's side, her father's side have a huge number of ministers, and although that's obviously not acting, there are public speaking skills, confidence, communication skills, and ability to tell stories that are required in any good minister, as you'll probably see at this time of year at some point. And I wonder if perhaps Mabel placed, I don't know the answer to this, but my feeling is perhaps Mabel sought to place her papers, her private correspondence, with a solicitor in an area that she had a connection with, but which was far away from where she lived her everyday life in London, perhaps for privacy, as we'll see as we go on. Mabel had several siblings, including a sister, Blanche Annie Watson, who was also an actor. And you really get a sense through this collection, and you'll know me by now, that I really do try not to put any too much interpretation or weighting or bias on anything I talk about. I try very, very hard to do that. But you certainly get a sense of what we call the artistic temperament through this collection. Now, Mabel lived in various London addresses through her early years, including Arundel Street and Buckingham Palace Road, and I know the area quite well. My family, at the same time that Mabel lived in Arundel Street, lived 1 mile away in central London. If you know London at all, Arundel Street is just off the Strand, not at all far from Covent Garden, so absolutely central. Buckingham Palace Road, where she also lived, is in Victoria, so just round the corner from Victoria Coach Station, Victoria Tube Station. So central London, central Westminster, right in the heart of the city. Mabel's debut performance was at the age of 12, where she performed in the Prince of Wales Theatre, where she played the Rose in Alice in Wonderland. And by the age of about 14, she was performing in Covent Garden, and her career had taken off, as this extract from the era of 1899 reveals. And I will warn you, my first couple of things I'm going to read to you, the first 3 or 4, are quite lengthy newspaper articles, but I wanted to share them with you just so you really get a sense of her. So this is from a newspaper in 1899. Miss Mabel Love made her debut as a child in the original production of Alice in Wonderland at the Prince of Wales Theatre, Christmas 1886-87, playing the part of the Rose and understudying Alice. Then followed an engagement with Miss Kate Vaughan to play one of the triplet children in Masks and Faces in the Opera Comique. At Christmas 1887-88, Miss Mabel Love played the elf, Sunbeam, in the pantomime of Jack and the Beanstalk at Covent Garden Theatre. and in the ensuing autumn appeared at the Little Vivandière in Faust, up to date at the Gaiety. This ran about a year, and at Christmas 89-90 she appeared at the Prince's in Manchester in the pantomime Babes in the Wood. In the spring following, she played Polly in the Harbour Lights with Mr. William Terrace, in which she introduced her first dance, a country dance, which was most enthusiastically received. In the autumn of 1890 came a 15-month engagement to dance in La Cigale at the Lyric Theatre. Christmas 91-92 found her engaged by Sir Augustus Harris as principal dancer at Drury Lane in the pantomime of Humpty Dumpty, and as the understudy for the principal girl. It goes on to describe how she then went to work, play the principal girl at the Tyne Theatre in Newcastle. In the meantime, she appeared as the ingenue Clementina under Mr. Tom Thorne's management at the Vaudeville Theatre. Further productions at Covent Garden. It says each of her solo dances that she did in a modern Don Quixote were encored every night. It goes on to describe various different parts that she took in. It just lists one after the other after the other. As soon as a performance is finished, she goes somewhere else. She goes to Manchester, she goes to Newcastle, she goes to lots of the London theatres. At the Christmas of 1894-95, she played the principal girl Maid Marian at the Prince of Wales Theatre, Liverpool. She then fulfilled a 3-month engagement to dance in Paris, and then that year went to America with Mr. George Edwards's His Excellency Company. In this, that she was so successful that although she had only originally been engaged for a month, he made special arrangements for her to stay over there nearly 5 months longer. The article I am only reading small snippets of. It goes on and on and on to talk about her prolific career, and as I say, back-to-back performances. And at the time that's written, she's still, what will she be? She was born in 73, that was written in 99. So she's in her 20s at the time that that's written. So she's clearly a very talented performer from a young age, and as I say, almost constantly in work from that very first day at the age of 12. If you have looked her up, and Jenny, I see that you said you have, you'll see she's incredibly beautiful, postcard of the era. And so you might imagine that her life is all going very smoothly and that things were great for her, because she looks like she has that picture postcard, glamorous life. That's not quite the full story. In 1889, at the age of 14, Mabel went missing. The police reported that perhaps she had been abducted, although they then said that they thought that wasn't likely, but it was initially the first thought. It seems clear through the collection that she had quite a strained relationship with her mother, and as I said, you get an impression of big personalities in this collection, of big egos, and that kind of the theatrics that run through the family. For instance, there's a letter from her mother accusing her of breaking her heart and not knowing the amount of pain she's causing her, and so on. So Mabel has gone missing in March 1889. Incidentally, it was reported as far afield as Canada that she had gone missing. This is an extract from the St. James's Gazette that reveals what happened. Missing actress found. Miss Mabel Love, remember she's 14 at this point. Miss Mabel Love, the missing actress, has been recovered. The clue obtained by Mr. Mosser as to Miss Love's movements on Saturday last has been followed up with success. Late last night, a brief communication was received from Dublin to the effect that Miss Mabel was safe in that city. This announcement was shortly afterwards followed by a second message from a distinct and independent source in the city, conveying intelligence to the same effect. The Press Association says, although the intelligence of her safety conveys no details, the theory on which Mr. Moser has been working with such favourable results is pretty clearly substantiated. It was supposed that after visiting the treasury of the Gaiety on Saturday, so she went to get her wages at the Gaiety Theatre, she started off on a sudden impulse, produced through pique, consequent upon the difference with her mother on the preceding day. Out of spite to her parents, to Ireland she went, with the intention of proceeding further, but her limited funds, about £3 and some valuable jewellery, happily precluded her from going further than the Irish capital, where her circumstances betrayed her. Mr. and Mrs. Love are confident that their daughter has no other intention and that her flight was the outcome of pique. This belief is apparently borne out by the fact that she left London and crossed the Irish Channel entirely by herself. Mr. Moser is making arrangements for her restoration. Now, it's quite interesting. There are a huge number of different articles about this and about what happened. Some say that her mother had been giving her some kindly advice and she had gone out in a sulk, basically. When Mabel herself speaks, she said that she received such a severe upbraiding from her mother that she couldn't stay. So, as I say, take from that what you will. But what I found very interesting was another article that I discovered in the Irish Society, which doesn't so much detail the disappearance of Mabel Love, but delves deeper into the reason for it. And it feels like a very interesting, considering it was written 140 years ago, it feels quite modern. So they have written, "The adventures of Miss Mabel Love formed one of the most interesting and exciting of social episodes during the present week. Her professional beauty, her demonstration of womanly intellect and developed character, strangely allied with the years of a child, present a psychological problem well worthy of consideration. Our readers are familiar with her flight to Dublin, the quarrel with her mother, the clever discovery of her whereabouts by the unaided efforts of a reporter on the staff of a newspaper, her explorations of the local sites of interest and her return home. Willingly or unwillingly, Mabel Love has laid the basis of a pecuniary fortune. Her salary will no doubt suddenly rise at the London Gaiety, as she will be the centre of interest for theatrical audiences for some time, and she will be given a more prominent part on the boards. She may yet develop into one of the world's great actresses, a future which we hope awaits her, and which she, as a child of pronounced and superior individuality, undoubtedly deserves." So they're talking there about the possibility of press coming from this. But we wish to draw attention to the ethical problems presented by the events which so suddenly appeared around the personality of this young girl. She was earning her own livelihood at an arduous profession. The manager of the theatre considered her an unusually self-respecting girl, and in the midst of the tainted atmosphere which surrounds the theatrical world, she assiduously, severely, and ardently strove towards the realisation of a worthy intellectual ambition. This type of character is rare at any time and in any circumstances, but more particularly so in a child of only 14 years. Now, so they're saying she seems to be a very strong and respectable character with a real sense of self-respect. It goes on to say there is unfortunately no law in the statute book which gives this girl a right to act independently in the affairs of her social life. We believe that the duty of her mother, when rightly considered, was to encourage Mabel's self-respect and not to attempt to undermine it. Now this is the great lesson which arises from what appears, perhaps, a surface-level incident of everyday life. Girls do not run away from home from mere willfulness. The fault in such instances seldom lies at the door of the runaway. Every thoughtful observer of the conditions of domestic life at the present day is conscious of the alarmingly large percentage of parents who are incapable of rearing their children. There is, under these circumstances, an imperative need for a law which will deprive unsatisfactory parents of the custody of their children. So really interesting that they have taken the line that she is innocent here and that the parents are at fault and that she should be allowed to live freely of them even at the age of 14. There were reports that there was accusations of it being a publicity stunt, or at least having resulting publicity, and when she returned there were 200 people crowding into Euston Station waiting for her to get off the train, but because she had suspected that might happen, she got off the train a stop early because she didn't want to be in the crowd. The final newspaper article I want to share with you goes on to tell us that rather than improving, Mabel's life took a turn for the worse later that year. Because this is from the Preston Chronicle and the Lancashire Advertiser of July 89. Attempted suicide of Miss Mabel Love. At 4:30 on Monday morning, the pilots of one of the fire floats on the Thames picked up the apparently lifeless body of a girl off Whitehall steps. The girl was taken ashore and handed over to the Thames police. She soon regained consciousness, and it then appeared that she was Miss Mabel Love of the Gaiety Theatre, who, it will be remembered, a short time ago indulged in the strange freak of suddenly disappearing and making a purposeless journey to Dublin. In answer to the police, the girl said she had made an attempt on her life because she was miserable. She added that she left her home in Arundel Street, Strand, at 3 o'clock on Monday morning and threw herself into the river at Whitehall steps when all were asleep. Being weak and exhausted, she was taken to St Giles Infirmary and subsequently to the Bow Street Police Court. So she gets taken in front of the court because committing suicide is a crime, or attempting suicide is a crime. And so she gets taken into the court. And they describe what she's wearing with her auburn hair. And they'd always talk about her blonde and auburn hair with huge curls and flowing curls. It always gets mentioned in everything. So she stands up in front of the court and says that she felt so miserable and so overworked. Mrs. Love, the mother of the prisoner, entered the witness box and said that when her daughter finished her engagement at the Gaiety, she would take her to Scotland. And the magistrate says, basically, I'm not sending her back to go back to work. She needs to be given a rest right now. And he says at the end to her, I'm very sorry for you. It's a great pity that you should excite yourself in the way that you've done. I would advise you not to look at another book or study until your health is restored. Unless you take my advice, it's impossible to say what may happen. I will hand you over to your mother and she will send you to Scotland or some other place. The prisoner was then discharged. An interesting insight, although we know about it, but to see her described as a prisoner when she's clearly struggling. So 1889 clearly was a very difficult year for Mabel, and again you think she's had this huge success, but also this huge difficulty, and she's only 14. But Mabel continued to pursue her career. And as that first newspaper article showed that I read to you, she went on to have great success. She joined the Folies Bergère in Paris, and she spent months on the stage in New York as well. She also appeared in adverts, so there are some great newspaper adverts for her for Odol toothpaste and different things. And she became friends with a wide range of contemporaries. So for instance, the famous male impersonator Vesta Tilley was a friend of hers. And she became the face of hundreds of photo postcards, and seeing there that there's links being put in to have a look at that, and she is the face of so many of them. And we have dozens and dozens of those postcards and photographs in our collection. She received a lot of fan letters, as you might expect, including apparently one from Churchill requesting an autograph. There are letters in the collection where people are writing saying, we think our daughter looks like you, do you think she'll get work, do you think she could be an actress? People who say, I used to be your dresser when you were 12 years old and I can't believe you've become so successful, all these sorts of things. Quite interesting how much of this feels like it hasn't really changed, the way that actresses are treated. Mabel, as you might expect, had no shortage of suitors, and this collection contains dozens and dozens of love letters, maybe hundreds of love letters. But I wanted to touch on two relationships in particular, and that's why I'm saying I'm well aware I'm going to go over time today, but hopefully you'll forgive me. It's striking to read these letters, and again, see perhaps some of the contemporary parallels with actresses' experiences over the years. There are numerous letters in the collections between Frank and Mabel, so I'm going to tell you about two of the relationships. Frank was France's Burdett Thomas Money Coutts, and he would go on later in 1912 to become Lord Latimer when he successfully brought a case to the Committee of Privileges at the House of Lords to claim that he was a rightful heir to that title. Interestingly, the Duke of Atholl was another potential, but he claimed that he should be the next Lord Latimer through the fourth Lord Latimer, who had died in 1577, so he's worked back, and he was granted that title. Frank was a barrister by training, but he was also a poet, a man of letters, a playwright, and also the head of the famous Coutts Bank on the Strand. And Coutts Bank is still on the Strand, although in a different building now. The Strand, as you might remember, being just round the corner from Arundel Street. He was called the banker poet, and this letter illustrates his range of skills as well as his tumultuous relationship with Mabel. Dear Mabel, I was more glad than you know to get your letter. First, glad that you'd not forgotten me, and glad also that you're succeeding and reaping the reward of your perseverance. I only wish I could come and see you. I really think if I were not tied and bound by the chains of my duties and responsibilities, I should come over and surprise you. I have over and over again at all times and seasons thought of you during the last months past. You were a gleam of sunshine, which died out, as all gleams seem to. Of course, I still work very hard. A volume of my poems comes out in February, published by J. Lane. My second opera, music by Albion, comes out in Barcelona on December the 15th and at Madrid a few days later. And a third libretto is ready for the Little Maestro. Tomorrow night, a one-act piece of mine is to be produced at the Royalty, and I'm writing a 3-act comedy for the same company. So I keep my hands full, and what's better, my mind, giving it no time to think of the sunshine departed. However, Goldenhead, accept my dearest wishes for your happiness, both at Christmas and ever after. Ever your affectionate Frank. Frank, incidentally, was also connected to the finances at the Prince of Wales Theatre, where Mabel started out, and the Lyric Theatre, where she also worked. Frank was also married with children. The relationship with Frank was clearly very close. There are many letters between the two, including some that indicate that her mother didn't approve of Frank. In one, he says to her, "Even your mother can't begrudge me wishing you a happy Christmas." There's a big age difference between Frank and Mabel. He was 21 years older, and of course, there was that wife and children. But the letters are passionate and emotional. Very much like young lovers, you get a feeling of people in their teens writing to each other and that sort of desperation to be the centre of the other person's world. He regales her beauty, he talks about how beautiful she is, accuses her of not writing often enough, comments about it all being impossible. He says at one point, "Unless you want to kill me, come at once, for God's sake, come." And he says in another one, "You can't know what misery you're causing me." It's, if you listen to this letter that he wrote to Mabel in 1901, when he was nearly 50 and she was 28. "Dearest Mabel, there's still no letter from you, and I feel in myself that all is ended. I only wish that when you came to me that wonderful afternoon, I had said, 'Now let us spend this one afternoon just as if it were 10 years ago, and you were still the girl you were then, and tomorrow we can have a long day together, and you can tell me all about yourself, and I can tell you all about myself.' Then, when tomorrow had come, I should have told you plainly about my life and its complications, and how, after all the pain I had suffered, I could no longer, at my age, do without a home. You see, like all the rest of the world, simply because one is supposed to be fabulously rich, you fancied that life to me must be all roses. It was not to comfort me that you came, but to satisfy yourself. But I was in misery, and needed comfort much more than you did. In a word, 10 years had changed me from a young man, content with life, to a middle-aged one longing for peace. I've had no fixed home since my mother died, no spot where anyone lived who loved me and was satisfied so to live and love. Remember and take this lesson to heart. Riches can buy nothing. They cannot buy love or peace of mind or companionship. Rather the contrary, they repel them. May God bless you. Goodbye." So you get that feeling, as I'm saying, of someone much younger than 50, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not implying that people 50 don't have feelings, but there's something very young and dramatic and passionate about that writing. This is one he writes later in that year. "Dear Mabel, I only got your letter after I had sent you mine. It's quite impossible for me to understand how you can really love me if you are willing to postpone our future to the Adelphi engagements. Eastbourne was bad enough. You evidently only have the faintest conception of what our future means to me. If you did truly love me, your one idea would be that you could come to me when you could. I hope I will see you tomorrow. I am in no mood to be shilly-shallied with." It's interesting there, and as I say, I will try not to cast any opinions on it, but it's interesting that that comment there about, you know, you're not taking our future seriously enough, when he is married at this point. If you're interested in finding out more about Frank, then he, as I say, he he had a long and complicated name with different titles, and he changed his name from Francis Money to Francis Money Coutts, and then to Coutts, and then to Coutts Neville. So there's all sorts of reasons for that, but the relationship with Frank seems to have ended in around 1904. And in one letter, Frank says to her, "Your mother has got what she wanted, to separate us forever. I doubt very much whether I could have ever made you happy." And Frank died in 1923, but not before leaving Mabel £300 per year. One of the things that comes up in Frank's letters a lot is a fear that the pair are being talked about and that it will damage her reputation. He talks about being very careful, and at one point he books them a room somewhere under the name of Mr. and Mrs. Watson. And that's something that's in common with the other relationship I wanted to talk about, which is Mabel's relationship with Bertie Fenwick, Herbert George Fenwick. Bertie was again a wealthy married man who had married his wife, Violet Edith Perkins, in 1901, although he had known and loved Mabel prior to that. I think his wife had a substantial amount of money. She was involved in an important family in the north of England, and the Fenwicks had houses in Bertley in Northumberland and also in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. There's a similar sense in Bertie's lessons of a grown man behaving like a teenager. In the letters, in early letters, Bertie describes them as just friends. We're just friends. He says that a lot. But it seems very clear to me as I was reading them and sort of uncovering the story, it seemed very clear that it was unlikely to remain that way, whether he thought so or not at the time of writing. Bertie also seems to have been on the end of threats and warnings from Mabel's mother, and he writes of his outrage that her mother could think so little of her daughter. In one letter he tells Mabel that he had chatted to his wife about Mabel because Mabel's mother had called and he'd been put in a situation where he needed to explain it. And he says, "My wife agrees with me that it's absolutely laughable, and she said she doesn't mind our friendship at all and our constant letter writing as long as we don't get ourselves talked about." Now, I can't tell you what anyone was thinking or what was happening, but I know that if I was with somebody and I read this letter that they had written to them, I would feel quite uncomfortable. Let me know what you think. So this is a letter written by Bertie to Mabel at the point that he's still saying that they are not in any kind of relationship other than friendship. "My dearest Mabel, I expect you will think me mad writing at this time of the morning, but I can't sleep. I've been dreaming on and off all night about you. Such queer, muddled up dreams. I can't tell you, little girl, how I loved seeing you last night, but it was very wrong of me to let you sit up so late. You looked so tired, dear, when I left. Do stay in bed for hours this morning and get a really good rest. I was very good and went straight to bed when I left you. No gambling. I told the cab to go to White's first, but then I changed my mind and thought I would just go home and dream of you. Mabel, dearest, you were looking too sweet for words last night. It is the nicest thing in the world knowing that you're my real friend and that I can tell you everything. And I like to know that although my little girl never wants anything, that I am always ready here to look after her. Mabel, you won't ever stop seeing me or writing, will you? I don't know what I should do. I should worry incessantly about you. It's such a horrid feeling when I'm not sure if you're well or happy or not. I should never forgive myself if I found out that you had any troubles and I hadn't been there to straighten them out. No, dearest, let's go on writing letters to each other. No, dearest, let's go on seeing each other like we do just now, just for a treat, occasionally. And in the in-between times, let's just have our letters the same as usual. Then I shall know all about how the little girl that I think is sweetest and best in all the world is. And I shall teach you to be ever so sensible and to not worry a bit, for though it would be the nicest thing in the world to be able to be together always, we must be sensible and just make the best of our half loaf. There can be no harm in two people being friends and fond of each other like that, and I know you and myself well enough to know that no other harm can come of our friendship. I wouldn't have it spoilt for anything, and I always feel if I hadn't got a clear conscience, it would be. But there you are always to be just the very dearest friend I have in the world, and I'm always going to watch over you and never let you have a minute's unhappiness. Now, dear, it's nearly 8 o'clock. I must send this off, or you will be out of bed, and I want you to get this in bed and to go fast asleep after you've read it until 1 o'clock, and then you won't be a bit tired when I come to see you again this evening. I'll be there at 10:50 exactly. Try and be punctual, dear. I'm always so shy hanging around the stage door. Poor shy little thing, aren't I? I'm going to send you some fruit as soon as I'm up because I know you like it. I wish I could think of something else to please you. Your Bertie. What a horrid long time it is before 10:50. Yeah, I think absolutely not saying anything, but I think I would find that quite uncomfortable if I had come across that. Not to mention the fact that he says, burn all my letters in case they fall into the wrong hands. Whatever the case was at that point, the pair certainly did become lovers, as seemed to me quite inevitable. And despite some receipts and adverts for some interesting contraception in this collection with instructions that I can never unsee, Mabel fell pregnant with a baby in the same year that Bertie's wife did. Mabel seems to have had quite a difficult pregnancy. She became ill and exhausted, but she gave birth to a daughter called Mary Verity Grant in January 1914. And the relationship continued, and there are numerous letters from Bertie promising to look after her, to provide for her, and to do anything for her. And Mabel seems to have really believed that he would marry her in the end. He doesn't seem to have had much compassion for his children, legitimate or illegitimate. In one letter he described his newborn daughter like this to Mabel, who was pregnant at the time. The daughter, and he gives the daughter's name, and he says, I don't really know what it's like. I forgot to look at it last time I was there. It was hideous, but perhaps it will improve with age. It's not got curly hair, which someone else will have, bright gold curls too. Although I should point out that that daughter, I have found some memories and reminiscences of hers online, and she described, although she didn't see her father hugely often, she described him being compassionate when she did see him. In another letter, Mabel describes how Mary keeps asking for him, the baby, but he's only come 3 times. And then during one of those times, he described the baby Mary as quite the ugliest thing he'd ever seen. Bertie's wife, Violet, took him to court in 1916 with a petition for judicial separation on the grounds of multiple adultery. The case was dismissed, and she applied again in March 1917 for the restitution of conjugal rights, and then for divorce on the grounds of adultery and desertion, which was granted in 1918. By this time, Mabel's daughter Mary was about 4 or 5, and there are letters in the collection revealing Mabel's attempts to find a school for her and a place for her to stay through the summer, and all the letters coming in from different people offering to take her in for the summer. There are still letters from Bertie, but they become a bit more distant, and the collection includes letters by Mabel recording her desperation that he's no longer paying to help with Mary's upkeep and not keeping the promises that he had made to her, and I think she realises not going to marry her. The backs of the envelopes have Mabel's notes on them, showing where she's noted promises within those letters, presumably to show the lawyers the things that Bertie had said to her. Here are 2 extracts, one written by Mabel to Bertie, and then the second one written by Mabel to a lawyer. So this is her writing to Bertie. For the last few days I've been reading your letters. There appear to be hundreds of them. Loving letters, passionate letters, friendly letters and callous letters. And through it all I have loved you from the bottom of my soul and been faithful and loyal all the time. Don't you think you might let me count for something now and make some little sacrifice for all that you have made me suffer in the past? I'm tired of being patient and nice to you. It's your turn to show some nice feeling. If I had been a horrid self-seeking mercenary creature, I should have made a scene at the time of your divorce. But instead of this I did everything in my power to protect you, thinking that you loved me enough to do the right thing in the end. But look at the years that have gone by since then. Have you offered me one atom of love or comradeship or protection? Well, I have letters to prove that you owe me everything a man can owe to a woman whom he's ruined in the name of love. I can't change as you have changed. I love you, it says all. And although lately I have thought your behaviour to me too brutal for words, yet the soft moments come when I see little Mary asleep, or I'm putting her to bed, when I can no more help loving you than I can help loving her. Even when she's been naughty and worried me to death, I forgive her the next minute. The financial question I suppose the lawyers must fight out, but my only hope of happiness lies in your hands, no matter what they settle or say. 4 months have gone by since you promised to make life pleasant for me, but during the whole of that time you have never asked me to your home or made yourself at home in mine, nor have you seen me except when I have begged and prayed to see you. Do you think you're playing the game? You who talk of honour and say that you can never expect to find it in a woman. And then this letter that she wrote to a lawyer. I have read most carefully counsel's opinion of my case, and I'm very sorry that it's not more favourable. Still, in some respects it seems hopeful. Personally, I have great faith in the law and in Englishmen's sense of justice. The law exists largely to protect the weak, the wronged and the unprotected, and I do not feel that any judge could hear my case without thinking that Mr. Fenwick must be made to fulfil his promise to make proper provision for me and for his child for life. About the time that Mr. Fenwick was divorced, I sent for him and told him it was impossible for me to carry on my profession and give the child the attention she needed, and he made me the following statement: that through his divorce he had lost his job, i.e. his post as manager of his wife's collieries, for which he had been paid £2,000 a year, that he had had to relinquish the money, £50,000, which she had settled on him, and that in the future he would have to live on money that had been left to him by his mother. He said he regretted intensely that he could not do anything for me, but that he would settle £200 a year on his child for life, so that I need have no anxiety for her future. He suggested that he might be able to better help me at some future date. My reply was that he must marry me, but the most he would do was to promise to marry no one else, and to always befriend me. Later I called on his lawyer, Mr. Poole, feeling that as Mr. Fenwick had asked me to marry him when he was a young man and free in 1894, that now he was once more free, there was no more obstacle to him marrying me, especially as his divorce had in no way been brought about by his connection with me. So I asked Mr. Poole to advise Mr. Fenwick to do so, if only for the sake of his child. Mr. Poole said he did not think that Mr. Fenwick would be happy married to anyone, and therefore he would not advise him to marry. But with regard to the child, he would personally see that Mr. Fenwick carried out his promise of settling £200 a year on her for life. Since then, £200 a year has been paid into my bank, and as late as last September, Mr. Fenwick stated that this would be paid to me until my child was 18 or 21, and then it would be paid to her. Since Mr. Fenwick's statement as to the smallness of his means, I have never once asked him for a penny, and although he continued to visit me on lover-like terms for some years, I never once received the smallest present of any kind. But I now maintain that he wilfully deceived me as to his means, and there's every reason that he should assist in maintaining me now, in a proper manner according to his means, and that he is under an absolute obligation to fulfil his definite and specific promise, approved of by the time verbally by his lawyers, of settling £200 per annum on his child for life. There is no doubt I should not have obeyed his repeated instructions to keep the name of the child's father a secret from the whole world, if it had not been for the latter pledge, which I quite thought had been carried out, and for the fact that he often said we were sure to finish our lives together, which statement I took to mean that he would eventually marry me. He repeatedly told me not to worry about the future, that he would always see that my child and I were provided for with the best of everything, and it was only when he told me of the smallness of his means that I had any idea he did not intend to make good his promises. It's a sad sequence of letters, and as I say, there's who knows what the right and wrong of the situation was. The lawyers make it clear that Bertie owes her nothing, although the letters do also show that he did make a regular contribution, at least during Mary's childhood years. Interestingly, in 1918, Mabel changed her name to Mrs. Mabel Ward, with Mary's father's name being given hereafter as George Ward. I can't find a record of such a marriage, and so it looks like it might have been something created to give Mary a bit of respectability, perhaps when she realised that Bertie had no intention of marrying her. Mabel retired from the stage to look after her daughter in around 1918. She went on to open up a school of dance and dramatic arts in 1926 in London, and only returned in 1938 to the stage to play the character Mary Goss in Profit and Loss. Bertie died in 1937, and apparently he left his estate to a wife that he had married after his divorce from Violet, another Gaiety Girl actress called Constance. He also apparently left a legacy to his legitimate daughter, but also a legacy to his illegitimate daughter of £4,000. And as I say, if you're interested in finding out more about the family, there's an extraordinary amount of work being done on a website online, which if you just look up the family, you'll find them, including some memories of the legitimate daughter. Mary the baby went on to marry twice. First Richard Thomas and then Captain Anthony Lorraine, who was a pilot who flew the Queen and Prince Philip on their 1953 tour of the Commonwealth. And apparently she spent time in the cockpit with him. And we hold some of their letters as well. Mabel retired in her later years to Weybridge, interestingly, where Frank also had gone. But he had, of course, died by then. She lived in a hotel in her later years, along with the male impersonator Vesta Tilley. The pair are recorded in a 1948 newspaper talking about their heyday and the fact that in their 60s and 70s at that point, they're now spending their time knitting socks for the forces because we're just out the war, diving, dancing, swimming, playing golf and growing vegetables. The article says, anything less like our idea of Victorians would be difficult to imagine. Mabel Love died in 1953 and she's recorded as a spinster, which again makes me think that that George Ward marriage did not happen. She left a legacy to her daughter, but it seems that Mary was unaware of it because she died apparently in some poverty, and she died in a fire in her house in 1973. So it's a story of extreme highs of career and extreme lows. A lot of big personalities in it, a lot of power struggles. Perhaps something that we would still associate with the world of stage and screen. I am very sorry I've gone over by 15 minutes, but it was such an interesting story I wanted to share as much of it as I could with you. So thank you for listening. I hope you can join me next week. Next week we'll be looking at music, dance and drama in the collections. That will be pre-recorded. And again, in the following week at the Ian Sutherland collection, which will be pre-recorded. And then I'll be back live on the 12th of January with a look at Sir Tommy Macpherson, one of our most decorated soldiers who went by the name of the Kilted Killer. Merry Christmas. I hope you have a lovely Christmas break and a very, very happy New Year. And again, thank you so much for all your company this year, and I'll look forward to seeing you next year. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. If you're able to donate, then we're very grateful. Thank you.